The warp drive is an idea that was invented by John W. Campbell in 1957, which is used to describe the beyond light speed capabilities of the engine in his novel Islands of Space, and was later popularized by the hit show Star Trek. But like many other science fiction concepts such as time travel, teleportation, and Dyson spheres, just because this idea came from fiction does not mean that physicists didn't have their eyes on it. In fact, over the last several decades, many brilliant minds have attempted to bring the fantasy of interstellar travel to life, using our current understanding of physics and the idea of warp drives. Our current understanding of space-time physics comes from Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity, which states that space and time are fused, and his theory of special relativity, which states that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. This is due to the famous equation E equals gamma mc squared, which shows mathematically that anything traveling at the speed of light can't have mass, since gamma would be equal to infinity. The other issue that arises when humans try to become interstellar is time dilation. Einstein's theory of special relativity states that when an object approaches the speed of light, time will dilate, or slow, exponentially as the object's speed gets closer and closer to the speed of light. Einstein's theory of general relativity proposes some solutions to the universal speed limit through loopholes in his equations. The first method would be the Einstein-Rosen bridge, commonly known as a wormhole. Wormholes can be visualized as tunnels which connect two different points in space, time, or both. In theory, they would allow a subject to travel incredible distances in short amounts of time, or even allow for backwards time travel. Wormholes are consistent with the general theory of relativity, however they remain to be seen, leaving them as only a theoretical solution to superliminal travel. Another theoretical solution to superliminal travel is what this video is focused around: warp drives. Einstein's laws also state that mass and energy can warp space-time, and that gravity is the curvature of space around massive objects such as stars and our planet. This gave rise to the science fiction idea that warping space-time could be a way of surpassing the universal speed limit. So what if it was theoretically possible to design an engine that could use this information to give rise to interstellar travel? In 1994, Miguel Alcubierre, a Mexican theoretical physicist and avid Star Trek fan, tried to bring the idea of warp drives to reality by coming up with a paper titled The Warp Drive: Hyperfast Travel Within General Relativity, which, as the name suggests, tries to combine our current understanding of general relativity with the science fiction idea of warp drives. His idea centered around an engine that would create a flat space-time bubble around the ship. Curving space-time around the bubble would reduce the distance the ship would need to travel. The issue with Alcubierre's paper is that his warp drive would require negative mass, a theoretical type of mass yet to be observed. The physics behind his idea is that there would need to be a very large amount of matter at the front of the ship, causing space to contract toward the ship due to gravity, and there would be a larger amount of negative mass at the back of the ship, causing the space behind the ship to expand due to anti-gravity. Due to negative mass being theoretical, and potentially not existing at all, Alcubierre proposed another way of creating warp drives, which involves generating a ring of negative energy around the ship to produce the space-time bubble. The unfortunate news is that Alcubierre estimated to make a 100-meter warp bubble with negative energy, you would need all the energy in the observable universe. Another issue that arises in the Alcubierre drive has to do with external observers. While the drive is operational, people within the warp bubble would have no ability to communicate with external mission control. It wouldn't be able to control their speed or direction during travel. Furthermore, the bubble would accumulate immense amounts of Hawking radiation. In 2020, during the global pandemic, Dr. Eric Lentz made the most of his enormous increase in free time by discovering a way to create a warp bubble without negative energy, solving one of the biggest problems with warp drives. This was made possible by his discovery of a special feature within the space-time geometry Lentz was experimenting with using the theory of general relativity, more specifically Einstein's field equations. For context, Einstein's field equations are equations that can calculate how space-time will deform given a particular distribution of matter and energy. They can also be solved backwards, by starting with a certain space-time geometry and then solving for the mass and energy required to create that specific curvature of space. This is exactly what Alcubierre did to arrive at his thesis. Lentz specifically examined the assumptions that Alcubierre had leading to negative energy requirements. He found that Alcubierre had only looked at linear relationships in his equations, and then began experimenting with more complex relationships to come up with a warp bubble that, unlike Alcubierre's, didn't require negative energy. Lentz also may have solved the issue of external communication by incorporating the idea of solitons into his calculations. Solitons are self-reinforcing wave packets that maintain their shape while propagating forward at a constant velocity. A warp bubble would undertake the properties of a soliton to allow for inertial proper time within the bubble to correspond to external time, and inertial observers would experience no inertial force as they would move with the speed of the soliton or warp bubble itself. However, this configuration of a warp bubble would still require an enormous amount of mass and positive energy. For example, Lenz told phys.org in an interview that the energy required for this drive traveling at light speed, encompassing a spacecraft of 100 meters in radius, is on the order of hundreds of times the mass of the planet Jupiter. The energy savings would need to be drastic, of approximately 30 orders of magnitude, to be in range of modern nuclear fission reactors. Fortunately, several energy-saving mechanisms have been proposed in earlier research that can potentially lower the energy required by nearly 60 orders of magnitude. Lenz is currently in the early stages of determining if these methods can be modified, or if new mechanisms are needed to bring the energy required down to what is currently possible. In conclusion, warp drives are still a concept of dreams, albeit mathematically accurate ones. According to Star Trek, warp drives were invented in 2063, but I believe we are a lot closer than most people think to this kind of technology. Bonus facts. In 2008, the U.S. government's Department of Defense contracted dozens of researchers to look into this topic, and in 2010, a 34-page report titled Warp Drive, Dark Energy, and the Manipulation of Extra Dimensions came back, but was not released to the public until several years later. This, along with many credible reports about UFO sightings, is what caused me to pick this topic for my physics ISP. Thanks for watching.